Now for our political panel, joining me from the LNP, sitting in the Liberal Party, Gerard Rennick from the Labor Party, Murray Watt, both in the studio. Thanks for your time, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tom.
Why don't we start on what's become probably the big political debate of the day. Some people say for bad reason or it's inappropriate. The bushfires and any link to climate change. Is it the right time to have a big conversation about this?
Well, Penny Wong gave a statement on behalf of Federal Labor before question time today and said that obviously everyone's attention right now needs to be focused on the crisis at hand, doing everything we possibly can to ensure that people are out of harm's way. We don't want to see more deaths like we have over the last couple of days, but we know that we are facing terrible conditions in the next couple of days. But what Penny did also say is that we do need, once this current crisis is over, to have a serious discussion about the likelihood we are facing more extreme events like what we're seeing now because of climate change. It's not good enough to have the government say that it's not an issue, we should never talk about it, it's not related. Clearly these things are related, but we do think that right now the primary focus has to be on keeping lives safe.
What's your response to that, Senator?
I'd largely agree with that, Tom. I don't think we should be discussing whether or not climate change is relevant to the fires today, given the conditions that are going on. However, I do agree that we should have a discussion about climate change later on, and in particular to hazard reduction and the way we manage our environment through practical solutions.
So is there a discussion as well about any link about climate change and the increased
droughts and fires
ferocity?
have always been, and floods have always been a part of the Australian landscape, and it's a question of how we adapt to these changing conditions, and I think that's what we need to be addressing.
Do you think the change in conditions is in part because of man-made climate change?
I think it's in part because the Earth has gotten hotter by a degree over the last 100 years, but I should add that the Earth's temperature has changed ever since time began. So how much of it relates to man-made climate change and how much of it relates to other factors outside of climate change, I can't answer that. I don't pretend to be an expert.
But do you concede it is a factor or not?
Yeah, it's a factor to an extent, but I think those on-ground conditions of fire reduction measures, building within what I'd call wooded forests, building those are the things that we can do that are going to make a real difference to reducing the risk of fire in this country.
Yeah, because you have previously said that the Bureau of Meteorology, you've accused it of rewriting weather records to fit in with the global warming agenda.
Yep.
What's the proof of that?
The proof of that is basically that they basically adapted a new weather measuring instrument and they didn't run a parallel run at the time. So if you're going to adapt a new measuring instrument, which they did in the late 90s, they should have run a parallel run with the old measuring instrument so that you knew what the difference between the old instrument and the new instrument was.
They've released some pretty detailed papers on homogenisation of records, for example, that if you took that out, actually it would look as though global warming was worse than it was.
Yep.
So,
okay, well look, I've worked in finance for 25 years and I've never known a CFO to walk into a company and rewrite financial statements from 100 years ago. Okay, so why you would go back 50 or 60 years and rewrite records that you've got no idea of how they were measured, the standardisation or anything, and then change that? You've got to have proof, and the way that you do regression analysis is that you've got to have a large number of observations to do this.
But the reason why they say they've been doing it is because there were issues with some measuring stations. In some circumstances there was a complete change around the environment, so it gave different readings. It's pretty detailed stuff. What are you accusing them of exactly?
I'm accusing them of not following proper process for recording statistical data.
But you had the word agenda when you mentioned this. So are you saying there are people in there deliberately altering data within the Bureau of Meteorology?
I'm saying that we should have a more rigorous testing of the Bureau of Meteorology in the way they change data, absolutely.
But the agenda part, as in they want more people to sort of take global warming seriously, so they're deliberately fiddling data. It's a pretty serious accusation.
Yeah, it is a serious accusation, and I stand by. I don't believe that the change in records and the way they've gone about it. And I've got a background in system accounting where I've changed records, and we've always done a parallel run.
Have you?
There's no standardisation between the old measuring process and the new measuring process.
Have you read the detailed peer-reviewed material that the Bureau has posted in response to accusations that they're fiddling data?
No, I haven't actually read that. No.
Wouldn't that be a good idea before making that claim?
Well, no. I read someone who I trusted, Jennifer Morosi, who's got a PhD in biology. She's wrote up about how, and if you listen to her speak, she's got heaps and heaps of statistical information. So I've basically posted an article by her on my website or my Facebook page, and I basically agreed with what she said.
Right. So
based on the
one
evidence that
person's
she
written
gave.
something, and you've agreed with that based on what they've said.
Well, based on her credentials, yes.
Yeah. But you haven't read the data or sought other readings,
Well,
for example.
okay. Well, I don't necessarily go. At that time, I was a Senate candidate, and my view is that if you're not, and I know enough to know because I've got a background in statistics, that if you're not doing a parallel run, if you're not doing regression analysis properly, then you've got to be very careful about changing data.
Do you
go on.
Do you have to be careful, though, about accusations as a senator? So you mentioned, putting this out there while you're a candidate. Have you sought maybe a briefing with the Bureau? You could probably get access to that, and you could ask your questions.
And I will get to that eventually, but that's not the main reason why I ran for politics. So there's other things that I want to get to.
But don't the facts matter? Wouldn't you like to find out what they're talking about and go to them rather than basing it off one person?
But the problem is the facts are that there was data recorded back in the 1930s that got changed. So what are you going to call the facts?
Well, again, without delving right into it, it's obviously the methodology which they've explained better than I'll ever understand. I'm a confessed non-scientist. So you'll get a briefing with the Bureau, will you?
Yeah, in good time, but right now there's other things that I came to Parliament for that I want to get done first.
All right.
Well, see, Tom, I think, unfortunately, this is the reason why it is impossible to get a sensible climate debate going in this country, let alone come up with some solutions. With the greatest respect to Gerard, who I get on with on a personal basis, this is just nuts. And these kind of ideas that are coming from wacky right-wing think tanks and are now being introduced into our Australian Parliament is exactly why the government can't come up with a sensible policy around climate.
What do you mean introduced into Parliament?
Well, by senators, by elected senators sprouting these weird ideas from right-wing think tanks that haven't got any evidentiary basis.
Well, someone with a PhD in biology from the University of Queensland that you went to, Murray,
not actually going...
is the same.
I didn't interrupt you. Not taking the opportunity to actually go to the real experts on these matters, like the Bureau of Meteorology, accusing them of conspiracies. Whenever we have those kind of views being aired within the government of Australia, it is going to prevent us from getting to a sensible position on climate change. And that's why we have the Deputy Prime Minister going out and making outrageous statements today. I've just come from Senate question time where yet again we have the Greens and the National Party engaging in a slanging match. It's actually about time that we had the grown-ups in this country taking some leadership.
Do you take aim at the Greens
policies.
for what they've been saying in recent days? Do they not help the situation?
I do think it's unfortunate that at a time when people literally are dying and God knows what we're going to be facing in the next few days around the country, that we have had the extremes of politics, right and left, taking the opportunity to point score. I mean, it would be easy for me to come in here and throw stones at the government, but what we're saying is that the primary focus right now has to be on saving lives. But I'm astounded to hear
I'll let you respond before I move on.
Well, okay, I didn't raise it, Murray. It was raised by the presenter. So, as I said, I've got high priority things that I want to deal with. And I stand by my statements that, based on the information that I read in the article, it was posted in the Australian, which is which is owned by, I think, the same organisation that runs Sky News. So I believe the article was credible. I knew the background of Jennifer Morosi. She had a PhD in biology, and I stand by what I said in that comment in regards to if you're going to start changing data, going back and changing data, you've got to have very clear and rigorous processes.